think the first thing is, are there any apologies? I take it that there aren't any apologies.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Alan Roberts has apologised. He's having technical issues.
It should be up on top, and they'd be blown on.
Sorry, Margaret. That was Alan Roberts.
Alan Roberts, yes, he's in a queue to get into IT, and I'm afraid he can't come in at all. Sorry.
We'll mark him. Apologies. Thank you.
Councillor Gwilym Owen Jones as well, Chair, is apologising.
Thank you, Gwilym, as well. Thank you very much. So this is two apologies. With that, there are no minutes from the previous meeting. That's quite normal, is it? Because this is really a. I'm looking for guidance now. This is really a continuation of the previous one. We were meant to be going through the statement of accounts.
Yes, sorry, Chair. This meeting is adjourned from the 20th of October, so it's the same agenda.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, thank you. So, so there's nothing to be challenged on that. So I think we can move straight on to the agenda then, which is the to agree the statement of accounts. There's nobody. I did ask if there's any declarations of interest. Sorry. Has anybody got any declarations of interest? I take it with that there isn't. So it's we're now going to lead on the statement of accounts for the 2021 and the ISA 260 report. So I think there are three sections of it: to present the statement of accounts, to present the annual governance statements, and to present the external auditor's report, the financial statements for the 2021. Who is going to lead on this? Is this?
I'll start, Mr. Chairman, and then I'm sure the Wales Audits staff will want to go through their ISA 260 report, but I'll go through my bit on the accounts to begin with, if that's okay.
No, that's terrific. Thank you very much indeed.
Hello. Yeah.
Thank you. So this is a copy for you as members of the Governance and Audit Committee of the final accounts that we intend to submit to the full Council for adoption next week. And of course, it does include the external auditor's report. And as we've already discussed, the ISA 260, which is the detailed report on the auditor's work concerning the accounts. So can I start by thanking the finance staff once again, especially Bethan, Claire, Shan, Gemma, and all the accountants who've ensured that we have reached this point. It's their hard work. I'm just the frontman. They do all the hard work. And I just present their work to you. I'd also like to thank Yvonne and Gareth from the Wales Audit Office for their work and their willingness to work with us to ensure that the accounts are accurate and to use their common sense when we were discussing a few items, just to ensure that we didn't focus too much on irrelevant details, and so that they just focus on the significant matters that they'd have an impact on the accounts. So thank you to those both groups. As the governing report notes, a few amendments have been made to the accounts following the audit. I'm pleased to say that the majority are technical issues, and although they do change the income and expenditure account and the balance sheets and so on, there aren't any significant changes in the important figure for you as members, or one of the important figures, which is the balance of the general reserves and the HRA. There are a few differences and they are noted in the report, but they're not significant and they don't have an impact on the council's financial position. As we change parts of the accounts, the notes also have to be amended, and by having discussions with the auditors, we have tried to improve the standard of some of the notes to the accounts, and one or two have been removed because the auditors didn't feel that they added any value to the accounts. So with that, and I also think it's worth noting another important thing in the accounts, which is the external auditor's report, which shows once again that our accounts have been prepared in line with the code of practice and that they show a true and fair view, which is the important thing, and that they reflect the council's financial position. So I'll hand over now to an officer from the Wales Audit Office. I think it's Derwin. So over to Derwin, thank you. Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon, everybody. This is the first time for me to attend the committee, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Derwin Owen. I'm an Audit Director in the Wales Audit Office. So it's a pleasure to be here to present my report on the audit of your annual accounts. And as Mark said, it's good to be able to say that we intend to give an unqualified opinion on your accounts. So that is, in our opinion, our accounts do show an accurate and fair picture of your standing as a council. I'll go through the report quickly and I'll draw your attention to one or two things. So turning to page 4 of the report, or 172 in the pack, and to remind the committee first of all that no auditor can give complete assurance that the accounts have been stated correctly. What we do is to work to a materiality measure. So just to remind the committee about that. And the figure for this year is £2.6 million. In the report, we talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the audit, and of course the pandemic is still having an influence on the way we work and how the council works. And we've talked about one or two things in the report, including the time frame and the audit method, which is undertaken virtually. The report then comes to its main conclusions, and just to confirm that the main conclusion is an unqualified opinion on the accounts. We then talk about misstatements. In paragraph 15, we say that there are no misstatements identified in the accounts which remain uncorrected, which makes the work easier for all of us. We then talk about corrected misstatements, and Appendix 3 to the report provides further detail about those. Mark has already mentioned a few of them. They're mainly technical issues, so I'm not going to go into detail about them this afternoon. About the significant issues, there are two comments I'd like to make. It is fair to say, however, in terms of the accounts of councils across Wales, they are complicated and it can be difficult to read. And in my opinion, the council could cut down the accounts. They could withdraw some notes which are under the relevance level. The less things that are included in the accounts, then the less work there is in preparing and auditing the accounts. So for the next few weeks and months, I'm happy to have that discussion with the council to see what points we can reach by next year. So that's the first point about streamlining the accounts. The second point concerns the quality of the draft accounts and the working papers. The first thing to say is that we don't have any significant concerns, but we do believe that quality could be improved through a quality review process before submitting them for audit. Having said that, we do understand that staff absence has been an important consideration when preparing the accounts this year, and of course we understand that and sympathise with that issue. Again, over the next few months, we are willing to discuss the process and to work with you. The recommendations, moving on from the comments I've just made. And so that's all I have to say, apart to say thank you to Mark, Beth and Claire and the team for all their hard work and their cooperation as we audited the accounts for the first time for Anglesey Council. So I'll hand you back to the chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Derwin. I was greatly impressed by the handover from Mark to yourself to do this. There's been obviously a great working relationship. You know, there have been difficult times without any doubt, and I know that we might, you know, we have struggled to finally get it to the end, but we have got there, and I would very grateful for your report then, and it's terrific to see this. You know, the closeness that you have worked with it, and I think it's, you know, that is an outstanding feature of it, because we have, without any doubt, as you say, you know, COVID has made a difference, working arrangements, but have got there, and thank you very much indeed for your contribution, the positive contribution that you've given to that. Thank you very much indeed. Is to Mark, going back to Mark, or to going?
Yeah, Mr. Cadell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to respond to the recommendations in the ISA 260 report, the Council and the Finance Department accept the recommendations and are willing to work with the external auditor to implement the recommendations and to improve the process and the paperwork in time for next year. And I hope that in doing so, things will improve. Both sides are learning, and hopefully after being through the process once, the auditors will learn and have a better understanding of how we work, and likewise for us. And I hope we can move forward and to make the process more streamlined next year. It's completing the accounts in line with a time frame that becomes short every year is difficult, and it means that problems do arise which come out in the audit process. So completing things in a hurry, although I understand why it's suggested, so that we can move forward and that we don't focus too much on what has been, but rather to look forward at what's to come. But by saying that, it does create pressure, and mistakes do happen which are brought up in the audit. And that's the problem, as we are pressured to close the accounts more quickly. So, but we do accept the recommendations and we will implement them next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Can I now turn to the committee? Are there any questions that anybody would like to ask? Clarification? I can't see. I can only. Yeah. I have my vice chairman, Dilma.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure you'd expect me to make some comment. Turning first to the accounts and the changes that have occurred between the draft and the final. There's a couple of sort of general points. I noticed that in many of the columns of tables, that the figures for the previous year, 2019-20, have been changed. Now, what sort of implications do changes to previous year's audited accounts have on the current year? And the other thing I'd like to say as a general comment, that in many of the columns of the tables, the very last digit has been changed by 1. In other words, is this because of a rule change, I'm asking, or whether we're rounding up or rounding down? As far as materiality is concerned, the changes usually involve something like £1,000. And I know our materiality is fixed at 2.6 million. How that came about? I suppose I also have some specific questions, but I'll leave those for the moment. Okay.
Thank you. I'll start with the response, and I think the second part is easy to answer than the first. There are so many figures in the accounts and they link together from one note to the next and so on. So it is difficult to get these roundings to work out correctly. You know, if you change one table, it might have an incorrect effect on another table. So there's a process of deciding which one to change, but I'm not aware, Bethan or Yvonne might be able to correct this, so I'm not aware of any changes to last year's figures. But I'm happy to allow Bethan or Yvonne to answer that point. Yes, some of the figures didn't correspond to last year's figures in the first draft, so that was the reason for some changes we raised during the audit. Yes, I agree with what Yvonne has said. When we transferred the spreadsheets from one year to another, they didn't come through completely and accurately. So you were correcting them to what was published in the final accounts for 2019-20. So these final accounts do correspond with the final accounts for last year.
Thank you very much. Did you? I've got one more hand up. Dylan, did you have another? Did you want to continue?
I'll wait for other questions if
all right.
And finish up if we have time. Thank you.
All right. Dylan Rees, I think that's the only other hand I can see up at the moment. Dylan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm just looking at the section in the accounts that relates to transactions with related parties. And I'm looking at page 65 of the Statement of Accounts and looking at the transactions involving Betsy Cadwallader Local Health Board. And I noticed that it says that at the year end, £0.458 million was owed by ourselves to the BCUHB, but that they owed us £1.354 million. So if my maths is correct, roughly they owe us about £800,000 more than we owe them. I'm just wondering, is there any problems or difficulties in the health board paying the monies that they owe us? Does it take undue time for us to get the money that they owe us, or is it a fairly seamless, smooth transaction? Diolch.
Of course, the accounts show the position at a point in time, 31st of March, so by the 1st of April it may have changed. So that's the first point I'd like to make. I think there's always been difficulties, not just for Anglesey Council, but for other councils in agreeing what Betsy Cadwallader University Health Board contributes to some care costs. This was a particular issue. I know when I started in this job 4, 5, 6 years ago, whatever it was, that there was a significant number of debts, historical debts with Betsy Cadwallader. A lot of those have been cleared. An agreement has been reached whether they were payable or not. Our processes have improved to make sure that when we enter into an agreement with Betsy Cadwallader, that there's documentary evidence to cover that, to make sure that Betsy Cadwallader staff can't then turn around and say, we never agreed to that. So our processes are much improved. And I think the position with Betsy Cadwallader is significantly better than it was, not just for us, but I think all the 6 authorities in North Wales would say there's a better relationship with Betsy Cadwallader, and they're more open to have a conversation around debts, and their finance director regularly asks for updates where they are in terms of paying their bills, and then they will be followed up by the finance director if we think that there are issues. But over the last year or so, I haven't had any real issues, and I haven't been made aware of any real issues with the debts concerning Betsy Cadwallader. They do pay now, and like I say, the figure is just at a point in time, and if we looked at it again a month later, it may be totally different.
Diolch, Mark. I was aware that there had been difficulties historically, which is one of the reasons I asked the question, but I'm reassured by your answer. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Dylan, I don't have another hand up at the moment. Would you like to continue?
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 or 3 little specific questions. On note 14, where Mark has highlighted the change of 2.14 million on the taxation value of non-domestic rates. In that table it's actually on page 45 of the pack, other figures have been changed as well, and they show, if you add them, that the net change is something like £68,000 from the draft. So there are offsetting changes to other income which compensate for the redistribution of the non-domestic rates. And I find that table now rather confusing, because originally it was showing 171,405 in the draft, and it's only moved by 68,000, whereas Mark has concentrated purely on the difference in the non-domestic rates of 2.14 million. That's one question.
The difference between on the non-domestic rates was the split and how Welsh Government funded their overall contribution to us, the aggregate external finance, as it's called, which is made up of the RSG and the redistribution of NNDR. They initially gave us how they were funding it when the settlement was issued, and then as things moved on with COVID, of course, their funds that they had from the non-domestic rates pool changed and decreased, which meant they had to recalculate how much they were putting in themselves through the RSG. So that's the main change. I assume that there are other small changes that have been identified during the audit which affects either the capital grants or the council tax income. But again, I'll pass on to Bethan or Yvonne to clarify that point.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Who's going to jump in?
Sorry, I don't have the because the 68,000 is below trivial level. I don't have that detail to hand at the moment, but the main change we document was the split between the NDR and the RSG changing. by the 2.14 million. That was the main change between the notes. I'm just trying to go through the files. Just bear with me.
My button, I think it's about treatment of a Welsh Government grant relating to NDR of 68k. That's why it's moved from the draft to the final.
Thank you.
I think if I can come in as well, I think the what we've done in our report in Appendix 3 is laid out all the main movements in the, between draft and final. If you look right at the very bottom of the report, we have got that catch-all comment about, you know, there are a number of other less significant changes which have been made to the draft, and I guess that's what has been picked up in that question. There is a £68,000 adjustment which hasn't been listed out separately, and of course has quite likely caused confusion then as to the draft and the final changes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Chair. May I just mention on in note 28 and 29, I know that the intention has been to simplify the reporting, but I find that table 28 and note 28 and note 29, there's a duplication there, because although note 28 is headed cash flow from operating activities, it does include an adjustment for items at the bottom which are to do with investing and financing. And then you've got the reverse of those in the table attached to note 29. So some of the figures appear twice, obviously reversed in one table compared with the other. But I find that adds confusion rather than clarity.
I wouldn't disagree with your comments on the cash flow statement. It's something I raised when I looked at it during the summer, and if I was doing the cash flow statement, it wouldn't look like that, but that's how it has been historically. So for this year's accounts, we carried on with the format as it is, but it's one of these areas that we want to look at and try and simplify and make a little bit clearer. But I agree totally, it doesn't make much sense to include something in one table and then reverse it back out in the next. It isn't the best note. I will accept that, and we will look at it for next year.
Thank you. And Chair, one specific point in table, I'm looking page 68, the top, revenue grants received and refer to the North East Wales Ambition Board. It's not the North East Wales as far as I know. I think it's North Wales.
Yes, it's the North Wales Economic Ambition Board. It's NWEAB, it should be, yeah.
That should be struck out, the East.
Yeah, we'll correct that before it goes to the council.
Thank you. Just as a general conclusion, Chairman, I was wondering, in view of the content of the audit report from Audit Wales, whether there couldn't be some benefit for members if we were to meet Wales Audit at a separate meeting. There are various things that are mentioned in the audit report, but words like streamlining, I don't know exactly what that means. I don't know, for instance, why things have changed this year from last year. Is it because Deloitte's were not given proper instructions to how to interpret the various IFRS and SIPFR codes? I find that if there were a meeting with Wales Audit, there'd be some clarification for us. That's just a suggestion. Thank you, Chair.
you very much. I don't know, would anybody like to comment on that? Would Darren like to comment at all whether, with regard to the Vice Chairman's question about whether a meeting with the audit would help to clarify some of these points?
Yes, certainly. If members wish to have a further conversation with Audit Wales, we're very happy to engage in that conversation. I think the streamlining concept comes from public sector professional body of SIPA, who have probably for a few years now recognised that council accounts have become very lengthy and very complicated, and have encouraged councils to look at the quantity of notes they include in their statements, and to consider whether they are actually, some of them are actually adding value. Now, clearly it's a local decision from members and officers as to what to include, or some of what to include. And I think we're very happy to engage in that conversation in the coming weeks and months. And maybe once that conversation is advanced between Audit Wales and the council, that might be a useful point to re-engage with this committee, so you're satisfied as to what, if anything, is being removed in terms of, or proposed to be moved in terms of next year's accounts. But that's what that streamlining concept's about, is about trying to remove, if I can use the words, some of the clutter within accounts across England and Wales. This is not just a Anglesey issue, this is across England and Wales. In terms of Deloitte's and us, it's the same basis upon which we conduct an audit. Both Deloitte, us, Pricewaterhouse, KPMG, and any other professional audit firm audit in accordance with international standards of auditing. That's the way we do it. Now, I guess there's always scope for professional bodies to have slightly different interpretations of slightly different things. But on the whole, all external auditors are required to conduct their audit in accordance with the same international standards, and that is what we've done. And based on my understanding of prior year audits and Deloitte's, that's what they've also done as well. But fundamentally, Chair, very happy to further engage with members individually or as a collective.
Thank you very much. Do you have anything to add to that, Mark?
Well, yeah, just on 2 points. Firstly, anything we can do to reduce the volume of accounts and make them clearer to the reader, because they are accounts for the taxpayers. And I think I've told this committee more than once that I think that local government accounts have become so cumbersome and complicated that they don't mean anything to anybody. And it's a shame that we've lost that somewhere along the line over the years. And a document that's over 150 pages long with a number of technical terms in it that don't mean anything to the man in the street. It provides no real value. On the point of streamlining, I agree with what Derwin said there about streamlining the accounts, but it's also streamlining our processes internally and trying to get more information directly from our main accounting system without having to transfer data to a spreadsheet and then having to manipulate that information in a way that provides the working papers. So if we can get more of the working papers come directly from the main accounting system, it's a lot easier for us, and of course it's a lot easier for the auditors to follow. So streamlining is two things to me. It's streamlining the accounts and streamlining our processes as well to make the audit process a lot easier if we can.
Thank you very much, Mark. I've got one further hand up at this stage. I think that is Dylan Rees.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I welcome Dilwyn's suggesting that perhaps we have sort of further engagement with Audit Wales, but I would suggest that sort of we postpone it for the time being, because obviously the composition of sort of audit and governance committees will change considerably after next May's elections, which is only 6 months away. And perhaps, following next May, then perhaps Audit Wales could look at perhaps providing some virtual training workshops, not for all individual 22 authorities, but perhaps on a regional basis, because obviously there will be new members who will have quite a sort of a a steep learning curve, and that might well sort of assist the process.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I was going to suggest that to Dilwyn, that we did leave it until the next composition, as you quite rightly say, after the elections. But not only that, is the introduction of 2 or 3 further members, independent members who will come in like Dilwyn, and so the actual the committee will be changed quite a little bit with having more outside influence on it. And I will certainly speak to Dilwyn about that. Is that we arrange that, as you quite rightly say, after the elections when we've reconvened this committee. Thank you very much. You happy with that, Dilwyn?
Yes, Chair. The only thing I'd add is that Dylan's suggestion of some training in the when the new composition of the committees has been has settled down is very welcome. I still think that there is something to be gained, that once the team, the accounts team and Wales Audit have had their discussions about streamlining, etc., that a meeting with Wales Audit would be useful for this committee. But that can be next, probably will be after next May. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other points that anybody wants us to raise? I am flicking through, but I can't see any other hands coming up. No, I don't think there is. I think, Mark, that really brings it to an end this afternoon, and it's just really a case of thanking you all for coming and the contribution. I think that I thought your introduction, Mark, and both Dylan, Derwin as well. This relationship that you seem to be building is a very confident booster, and I would like to thank you all for that. And quite rightly, I think that Mark, if you could also pass on our thanks to all the staff. Bethan and Claire, you've mentioned, but I'm sure to all the staff, for getting us to here. There's been a lot of work going on. I know we have taken a little bit extra time, but we have got it there, and we've now finally approved this to go to the full council. So thank you very much indeed for all the team's effort into get it here. And I'd just like to thank you all, for coming again this morning and agreeing on these, so we can move forward. The other thing
Mr.
that
Chairman, sorry to cut across, but I think we need a formal vote just to accept the accounts, please. I
was going to come back next week again. I think you're quite right. I think you're quite right. Yeah, we do need a formal vote. So I need to go round you all now to accept these accounts. Can I? We'll start off. So I'm looking now for the vote. I take it. So we'll start with John Griffiths.
Yes, I agree that we forward on the accounts to the full council.
Dylan?
Yeah, Devon accepts.
Margaret?
Derbyn, Mr. Cadeirydd.
Yes, I accept, Chair.
Jeff Evans? Jeff Evans? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm in now. Yes, I agree.
And then Dylan?
Yes, I agree, Chair, but are we also including the annual governance statement? Because we've not mentioned that, even though we've been through it in June.
Yeah, are you asking if we to look at that now, or are you accepting?
No, I'm suggesting, Chair, that is part of the package.
What we're voting on.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And I agree. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So I think that that satisfies that everybody, or the whole committee, is in agreement. Yeah.
Mr. Cadeirydd, Cynghorydd Richard Griffiths yma.
Chair, it's Councillor Richard Griffiths. It's
Sorry, I put the line through Gwilym's name and Richard Griffiths, but I haven't seen you there. Very sorry.
Mae'n iawn. Hapus i dderbyn.
I'm happy to accept, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's been a very long meeting. You have to understand that. Thank you. So I'll bring that to a close then. And yeah, thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.
Thank you all.